Welcome, Thrivers, to this week's episode of Women Thriving in Business podcast. My guest today is Kat Eckles, who is the co-founder of Clean Juice, which is an organic juice and food bar franchise company. So welcome, Kat.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Yes. So let's just jump right into it. So, Kat, tell us all about Clean Juice and what prompted your entrepreneurial journey.
Yes. So Clean Juice, we call ourselves the first and only USDA certified organic juice bar franchise. So all of our products and all of our juices and smoothies and produce, everything is completely certified USDA organic. And we make all sorts of really fun products. We do fresh juices, we do bottled juices, we have smoothies and protein smoothies and acai bowls and everybody's favorite avocado toast. And we recently launched with wraps and smoothies, or wraps and sandwiches and salads. So we've really become kind of a one-stop shop for people that are just busy and have to eat out and they want to eat out on the go, but we're sick of going to fast food restaurants or having heavy food during the day. So we've really excelled with those type of people who live a busy lifestyle, but still want to eat healthy. And we actually founded it. My husband and I opened it together back in 2014. We had the idea. And we were actually living up north. We were living outside of New York City. And of course, everything starts in New York City and LA. So we'd go into New York City and there'd be all these juice bars and they'd be packed and they'd be so busy. And then we'd go back to like our suburban home and it would be like McDonald's and Chick-fil-A if we were lucky back then. So we were like, I really think that people outside of these hubs of New York and LA want options that are healthy. So I had actually been into making smoothies for almost a decade. After we had our first children, I realized I have to eat healthy and I wanted to feel better, but I hated vegetables. But I figured out if you could put all the vegetables in a smoothie with a banana, blend it up, it didn't taste so bad. So that kind of started my own journey into just health and wellness and just wanting to eat right. And so fast forward a decade later to when we had this idea about a juice bar, I had been studying for this life I didn't know I was going to have, but I had been learning all of these things for so long, just about healthy eating, organic eating, health and wellness in general. So it was a really easy transition for me to bring that knowledge into a business and partner with my husband to open up this type of concept.
Great. Beyond just wanting to eat more healthily and realizing that there was a business opportunity, right? What were some of the things that really prompted you to move from a corporate life, a job, to saying, hey, I can actually create a business on my own that I think is sustainable and can support our lifestyles?
Mm-hmm. Whenever I talk to anyone about this, I think people are looking for me to say, and probably the responsible decision is to say, I had a business plan and I studied market trends and I did this and that. And it was like kind of the exact opposite. My husband was working and he was traveling overseas and he was gone for weeks and weeks at a time. And we just knew we wanted to be together as a family. So I approached him and I was like, listen, I want to do this. I think I'd be great at it. And I would like you to join me. And so literally within 24 hours, he was like, I think we should do it. We moved to somewhere. We were living up north where the lifestyle was very expensive. So we moved to the south where we could get our house for less money and we could use some of that cash to do the business. And it was a decision that we made literally 24 hours. So I'm the exact opposite of what somebody's looking for if they're like, we need to plan and we need to this. But I really think that probably made us really successful. Like we couldn't not be successful with it. And we just went at it full force. And it was a decision that we made quickly and swiftly and really with our hearts and with, we call it a calling. So what we felt really called to do in that moment. And I think that there's probably an element where sometimes it's like, we've gotten to the point now where I'm so deep in this business, we're looking at data for every little decision we make. And I feel like that's probably slowed us down a little bit. And sometimes I'm like, we need to get back to that, just trusting your gut type of intuitive business thing. It really was intuitive and it really was. And I also knew it. I really knew the business. Like I said, it is something that I had known for 10 years. So I knew that there was something there that other people wanted.
Right. I think your story is great because so many people are paralyzed by what they're told, right? The advice of you got to have a business plan and you need to have your market all figured out. These steps that are often people may perceive them to be barriers or obstacles of the planning to start a business when they just have the idea to start a business. But I think your motivations were really profound, right? Like you wanted to be in business together, you wanted to have your family intact, that you wanted to provide this, I'm going to say, gateway to a healthier lifestyle. Those things are motivating factors that I think people often overlook those as they're thinking about their business. So,
Absolutely. And they don't take them as like, those are real reasons. You know what I mean? I think somebody's looking for this system that doesn't exist of analyzing all the things that could go wrong or not go wrong. And it's like, we can do that. And we do it now. But sometimes it's just having your heart and your intentions and your energy all moving in the same direction. And that's going to be more, like you said, more profound than anything.
mhm. And I like the fact that you all were willing to move, right? So it wasn't just, oh, I need to figure out how to do this here. But you realize, like, okay, in order to do what I need to do and almost give yourself a runway, right? You're like, we need to move somewhere where it's cheaper. So we have that runway. So how did you all start off? Were you doing it out of your house? Did you start off with a brick and mortar location to begin with? And then kind of talk about how Clean Juice has grown over the years.
Yeah, so our first location was a brick and mortar store. So we moved down to Charlotte in 2014, towards the end of the summer near August. And then we opened our first store in 2015. So it was about June of 2015. So it was a solid year that we were just working on creating the menu, of course, doing all of our architecture, just all the planning for the business. So that took about a year to get it up and running. So in the meantime, we were just like every single day, I remember we'd go to Costco and get just bags of stuff and just test stuff. And I would test it on neighborhood kids and friends. And we'd have parties over, or people over to have parties to test new items. So it was really that first year we were just doing everything out of our house. And then our first store opened June of 2015. And it was in a cute little center in suburban Charlotte called Birkdale Village. And really, we were the first juice bar in Charlotte. So that was a big deal. We were kind of drawing from people all over. And the day that we opened our doors, 10 people that day were like, is this a franchise? How can I get this? And my husband and I hadn't really, we knew we wanted to grow. We both are kind of very entrepreneurial and kind of big vision people, but we had never thought about franchising. We just thought that we would probably own maybe 20 stores that we would all run ourselves. And that was going to be a big deal. And so we really started to dig in about what franchising was. And we got connected to a lawyer and we got connected to people. And we really figured out that it was probably the best way for us to grow. It was kind of this time where juice bars were kind of taking off. And we knew that we had a product that was set apart. Many of the juice bars, and especially the franchised ones, they're definitely not organic. And most of them are like using syrups or lots of sugar. So we knew that our product stood apart. And we knew that if people were wanting to add juice bars to their town, that we would be a great option for them. So we pretty quickly decided to get our franchising paperwork together. And that took about, I would say, 6 months. And then we were able to start selling units. And then our first franchise store opened up in March of 2017. So about a little less than 2 years after our first corporate store opened. And in those 2 years, we opened 3 additional corporate stores just to make sure we had proof of concept. And we opened one 4 hours away from our original store just to make sure it wasn't too much brand recognition in one area. And that all went great. And we really from there just grew fast. That was kind of the wild, wild west a little bit, just because it was, I think juice bars in general were really growing during that time. But then on top of it, I think that we had the best in class product. So it really kind of set us apart.
Great. And how many locations do you have currently?
We have about 130 open and then another 50 to 70 in development. And I think we'll continue growing at probably that pace, about, we'll say 50 a year on the safe side.
Great. And so you talked about being all organic. So are you all actually growing your own produce, or are you partnering with local farms in order to obtain your produce?
Yeah, so we partner with all local farms. We have a national distributor, but actually national distribution, it's pretty cool because, especially with produce, for the most part, they work with local or at least regional suppliers just because it makes more sense. If they're getting their kale from a guy out in California and taking it to Florida, it doesn't really make sense for them because they're just more regional hubs. So we have a distributor that works all that out. We do bottle our own juices at a facility where it's really cool because the facility is literally on a farm. So they'll pick the produce and it's produce that's grown just for us. We've been out there. We've seen it many a times, and they'll pick it and they'll take it right back to the center to juice it. So it's about as literally as fresh as it gets. There's absolutely no middleman in between it. It goes right from the farm to being pressed later that day, which is really awesome. So it's been cool. Farming is amazing. you show up at the grocery store and you get a thing of strawberries and you just kind of take it for granted. But when you really
Right.
dig into all that goes into it and the hard work and just the intricacies and the small margins, it's really incredible when you figure out how our food is grown.
It's fascinating. I grew up, my family's from North Carolina. I'm from North Carolina. So I grew up on gardens and those types of things. So and we always pick fresh produce. So it was
Yeah.
the thing. And the food just tastes different. And
Yeah.
it's amazing when you can get that fresh,
Oh,
locally grown. It's
absolutely.
delicious. So, Kat, talk to us a bit about some of the challenges that you faced during your time in business.
Yeah, there's been many, especially over the last few years. I don't think that anyone's really kind of escaped the last few years, especially in retail and then especially again in food. But like I said in the beginning, I think that we had a really great concept, but we had a really great timing with how we entered the market. And I think since then, there was like the juice bar boom, and now it's kind of evening out a little bit. So the growth has been a little bit different. It hasn't been so skyrocketing. It's been a little bit more slow and steady. And I think that was a little bit of a scary adjustment for us. But on the tail end of it, once we got through it, it's been healthier because we've learned to take a deep breath and work through stuff slowly and just have a more consistent offering for not just our guests, but our franchisees versus this just chaotic growing at lightning speed. Like, I guess we've matured a little bit as a business. And then, of course, COVID happened and we were in food. So we were necessary business. So we were able to stay open, but then you kind of deal with all the philosophical and moral dilemmas of who believes this and who believes that and what's good for, you don't want to expose people, but you want to be able to offer there for people and you wanted to keep your business open and keep jobs going. So we all had to kind of like dig deep there in general and then deal with just kind of being able to serve our product versus many different opinions in a very tumultuous time. And then after that kind of came the labor crisis where the Great Resignation and people weren't wanting to work, and especially people in food service not wanting to work. We had our whole corporate staff behind the bar working shifts, making
Oh,
smoothies.
wow.
Yeah, we had it for months. We would all take turns just because people would just stop showing up for work. And that's kind of steadied out again. And I actually just had a conversation with my district manager yesterday. He was like, he had a manager that one of our stores quit and the whole staff quit. And then there was like only 3 employees. So they're trying to figure out what to keep open. And he was like, I've had plenty of these interviews, but they're all people that showed up late or all these different things. Like they weren't employees that you'd want to be working at your job. And I'm like, I think that we have to stop scrambling and stop putting anybody in a position just to keep a store open. And maybe we do have to get a little more patient and a little more sure that we want the right people in the right seats on the bus. So if we don't open the store one day while we get ourselves together on a staffing issue, that seems more important to me. So I think we've kind of learned to take our breath in business and kind of see things through correctly instead of rushing to put a Band-Aid on the solution.
You are sharing some of the challenges that a lot of businesses went through over the past few years. And that advice on kind of taking a breath, I think that's really key and important. What would you say as you think about all these different challenges? What belief or what vision for your business did you hold that allowed you to really weather those challenges?
Well, I really believe in the products that we offer. So I think that even in the really hard times and the times that you want to give up and the times where it seems like it's all too much, I think I bring myself back to why we started. And like you said, it was family and this calling, but I do believe that people are just busy and they're on the go and they aren't going to stop doing that. And if there's a really healthy option, I do think that they'll choose that. But if there's not, they're probably going to choose an unhealthy option. So I feel like we're making a difference in people's lives just because I believe in food as kind of medicine and as kind of a healing option. So I think on the really hard days, I bring myself back there. But I also think, and I heard this quote and it had to do with meditation, but I've really thought about it a lot with my business. And it was about how I'm a big believer in meditation. And it was the benefit of meditating is you're going inside, you're very quiet, you're silencing yourself. And when you throw a rock in a very silent pond, you can see it ripple. You can see all the places it goes. You can see all the places it touches. And it's just makes such a big impact because the water is calm. When you throw a rock in the ocean, when you throw a boulder in the ocean, you can't even see what it's doing because the ocean's going all over and you have no clue where that boulder even went. So I thought that was just it helps me in business. It's like, all right, I have to stay calm. I'm the leader of this company. I have to stay calm inside of myself and I have to keep the company calm because we can see when we throw a pebble, hey, this pebble that ricochet is not looking so good, but this one's good. So when you have that really calm energy field, it makes a huge difference versus if you're just throwing stuff everywhere and the water's going, this person's, you have to be able to, in any ways that you can, keep the surface really calm so that you can see kind of the direction to go.
I love that. I was just recently on a mastermind, and one of the women said, entrepreneurship is like being a duck. If you ever see a duck, the duck looks like it's floating on the top of the water, right? And then it's like paddling furiously below. And I was like, that's so great. So adding that to the stone,
yes,
and the ripple impact. So what are some achievements or accomplishments that you're most proud of in your business?
I think just the fact that we've been able to just kind of withstand as a food establishment and a specialty food establishment kind of during the last few years. I think it's not an easy industry. And I think that it happened really fast for us. And we've just been able to, we're still married. That's a positive. It's like, but we've been able to withstand a lot. So I know that's not, I can name awards and this and that, but I think just the perseverance that us and our team, of course, have been able to continue to show up day after day and make improvements and remain open-minded and remain unjaded with all the stuff that's thrown at us. I think that's probably our biggest accomplishment. And it's really important because I think that this is our lives. It's our employees' lives. It's our franchisees' lives. If we don't love it and we're letting it bring us down, there's no point. So right. I think just being able to rise above, because business is really hard. I mean, I think owning a business, running a business, being an entrepreneur, it's truly one of the hardest things that you can do just because there's so much culpability and there's so much pressure and there's so much understanding and it's a big, big responsibility. So I think just being able to keep weathering the storm and showing up day after day is an accomplishment in and of itself.
I agree. And what would you say as you think about kind of where you started and where you are now, what are some tips that you would provide to the listeners around, I would say, thinking bigger and managing bigger, right? Mm-hmm. So if you started off with an idea of like, I just want to create a juice bar, and then that has turned into a franchise model, and then that has turned into, I'm sure now you're running a corporation, right? Mm-hmm. So what are some tips that you can say, or what is some advice that you would give folks as they're just starting out that can help them kind of prepare for to step into that bigger arena? Or what was some of the things that prepared you for this moment that you're in now?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think fear in general is the thing that's going to stop everybody. I think some people have fear from even starting. Like I have a photography friend who's wildly talented and won't go out and take their camera and charge for it because they think they need this and that and the other thing. And it's fear, it's out of fear. There's been so many times in the last few years where, like I said, I've wanted to give them up because I'm scared. I don't want to let people down. I don't want a franchisee to invest their money and fail. But when you give into that fear, that's the only thing that's going to bring you down. So you have to find a way to overcome those things. And I think the funny thing about life is everybody's looking for a script or a plan or like a formula. And I just really believe that the only thing I could go, and I've searched and I'm very spiritual. So I've done all sorts of stuff on the outside and I've read things and I listen to podcasts and all that's really good and important. But it's really not until I get quiet within myself and learn to trust my own instincts that I'm operating at my best and I'm able to make those decisions that I can and that I can overcome that fear. Because the truth of the matter is those things are going to happen, right? You're going to have failures in business and you're going to let people down in business and an employee is going to quit on you in business and you're going to be a bad boss to this employee in business. And there's so many things that all of those fears that you have are going to happen in some way or another. So it's really just about preparing yourself to experience those, to learn from them, to better yourself from them, to come out the other side of them a better person, and just really figuring out how you yourself can deal with that fear. And it's not going to come from the outside. You can get great tips from people. You can listen to things that are going to spark things, but you really have to know yourself and search yourself and figure out your ways to deal with this. And then I think the other thing is I read a quote and it said, belief is not knowing. So if you start to believe something, you're probably about as far off as you can be. So I can't tell you how many times it happens with food all the time too, right? It's like one day's coffee's good, one day's coffee's bad, one day you should be eating all animal, one day you should be a vegan, one day you should do this and that. And it's like, even me with the way I feel about food, I've had to make sure that I don't become too dogmatic, because that's the time that I lose sight of everything. And that happens so much in business too, is I can't believe how open-minded I've had to become. And for me, that's not like, I like knowing, I like being sure of something and running full force. But I just think that the more you remain open to absolutely everything, the better off you'll be. So just remaining really open-minded and really taking into consideration all viewpoints, all perceptions, and all changes that are going to happen, because we're all evolving. The world's evolving. That's a really good thing. I think sometimes people forget about that. They get scared and they want to go back to this, but it's good. We're all improving and evolving. But with that, things are going to change. And when you're a business owner, you have to really keep your finger on the pulse of all that to make sure that your business aligns with the way the world is changing.
I love that. That belief is not knowing. I love that. Really preparing for fear and just dealing with it. And then this idea of being open-minded, I don't think anyone's ever put it that way. I truly believe entrepreneurship shows you who you are. You have to face yourself every day as an entrepreneur, because there's no one telling you what to do and when to do it, right? You have to be internally motivated. But that idea of having to become even more open-minded, I think that's an amazing way of describing what entrepreneurship is.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of the opposite of what you're kind of told. You have to stick to your convictions and know who you are and put this out. And it's like, how many times, just because I'm in the food space, I'll relate it to this, but there's so many famous or whatever known vegans that build their whole life upon being vegan, and then will tell me behind closed doors, like, oh, I actually do eat meat because I feel a lot better when I eat meat. And I don't want to tell anyone because I've done this. I'm like, tell them that. Just say I felt great as a vegan for 5 years, and then I changed, my body changed. And now I feel really good eating animal stuff. That's part of your journey, and you were supposed to be there. And it's okay to share that. But I think people get so, especially with social media and what's your brand and what's this, you think you have to remain in these lines, and that's just not really life at all. So
Yeah. And I think you could bring up a great point of everyone's on a journey, right? And I think if you're in the public eye, you actually have an obligation to say when things have changed with you. Because I think people who are influencers, and I'm not saying like social media influencers, but people who can influence others, people take your words seriously, and then they go and create almost an impossible standard, right? So
absolutely.
like, I'm vegan all day because my favorite whoever said veganism is the best thing ever. And then they're like doggedly vegan, no matter what, right? No matter what their body may be telling them, no matter what is happening elsewhere. So I think people owe it to those who they can influence to say, like, things have changed.
Absolutely. It's funny, when we first started, people will be like, oh my gosh, you're so healthy. You do all this juice. What do you make for Thanksgiving? Do you have any tips? I'm like, I make butter for Thanksgiving. Okay. That's what I make. Lots and lots of butter. Don't get me wrong. Like, my favorite shirt we ever had was, this morning I juiced, so tonight I can taco. You can't be dogmatic in anything, I guess, is my point in life. And that's coming from me. That was a really, like I said, I'm very spiritual. I've been like a really, really strict traditional Christian. And I've had to realize, even with those beliefs, and it actually happened because we fostered 3 children from Afghanistan a few summers ago, in the summer of 2019. And they were Muslim, and I had never really been around Muslim anybody. And then I like fell in love with these 3 kids that I was taking care of for 6 months one summer. It set me on this whole like spiritual journey of like, are they going to hell? I had to like kind of go through all that as a Christian too. And I think that it's been funny to watch my food beliefs evolve, and then my spiritual beliefs evolve, and then my business beliefs evolve, because even with business, I was so strict about some certain things, and I would only allow this certain ingredient. And they were like, Kat, we can't source this ingredient across the country. And I've had to realize sometimes perfectionism or super strict views in one area is going to be the single thing that sinks the ship that you thought that you were sailing with these beliefs. So it's funny how sometimes life does that. It aligns all these different pieces of your life at the same time. And I just think it's all about growth and knowing yourself that it's okay to question things that you once thought as whole truth.
I think it's great for you all to have had that experience of bringing those children into your home. And it just reminds you that when you are engaged with others who are different, that supposedly are very different than you, right? You actually realize, A, we're all humans. B, these beliefs are not so far apart.
Oh, that's 100% what I realized. It was funny. Like, they came into our house. They were from, war-torn Afghan. Like, they had never seen indoor plumbing and They had lived in a war-torn country their entire lives, and they were all sick. They were here on like a kind of exchange program for them to see doctor. Nothing like too serious, but enough thing like one had to have kidney surgery and one had like a skin disorder and things like that. And their English was minimal at best. And it was the best summer of all of our lives. We just spoke the language of love those whole 6 months, like for them and for us. And it was like we knew each other so well while being completely worlds apart and barely speaking the same language. To me, that's what God is, right? That's love, that's uniting us. That's what, even in those beliefs, we're kind of getting off business now, but it's like beliefs can be so divisive. And we've seen it through the election cycles in the last few years with COVID. And it's just like, my God, we all want the same thing. And we're all stuck on these hardcore differences that we think we have that really aren't there when you're sitting around your living room playing a song and watching a TV show or whatever it is. Right. So I think that the more that we can just all unite together in any way is great.
Thank you for sharing that story with us. So there's 2 questions I ask every guest on the show. So one is, what are 1 or 2 songs that are on your power playlist and why?
I've loved country music forever. So that's actually funny. I just told my goddaughter today she had to write her quote for her senior yearbook. And I told her my quote was this song from Rascal Flatts, and it's called These Days. And the quote was, life throws you curves, but you learn to swerve. She was like, that's so funny because it lines up with your life so much. So I'm like, yeah, it must have been like a very ominous thing as like a teenager that I chose that. So I guess that would be a good song. I love that. The These Days by Rascal Flatts. And when I get hyped, there's a song called The Fight Song by Rachel Patton. That's a good one. It's like a pump you up. I'll listen to it when I'm working out or need a little bit of hype or something.
And what is one book that you feel has helped you thrive in business?
I'm a huge reader, so I have a million of them, but I really like, and this is a little bit controversial, but there's this book, Think and Grow Rich. Have you heard of it? Napoleon Hill. It's an old book from the 60s, but I think that the concepts in that book are life-changing, business-changing, mind-changing. I think that anybody in business and really in life should read that book and really marinate on it and maybe read it a few times because it's big principles that can change huge outcomes in your life.
Great. Thank you. I've read it a couple of times. It's on the list of books that I read ever so often.
Yeah, that's what I do too. Exactly.
Reminder, like, oh, these are good things. So Kat, if folks want to learn more about you or Clean Juice, where can they find you?
Yes. So we're on all the platforms. So we're just cleanjuice.com online. We're at Clean Juice on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, all of them. We actually have our own podcast called Be Organic. It's a health-based podcast. So we have a lot of great doctors or nutritionists, just people that know a lot about health and wellness and food. So that's really fun. That's on all podcast avenues. And that's probably it. And we have, like I said, 130 locations nationwide. We're in all 30 different states and growing. So I'm sure we have one close by lots of people.
Great. Well, all of that information, we'll add that to the show notes. Well, Kat, it has been a pleasure talking with you today, getting to know more about you and Clean Juice. And I'm excited to see what happens next for you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for your time today and for encouraging other women in business. It's been an awesome journey for me. So I love that women are getting entrepreneurial and really digging in because we have a lot of great things we can do. So this is an awesome podcast.
Definitely. Thanks, Kat.
Thank you.
Sure.